give out information in the double homicide of Liberty German and Abigail Williams. On February 13th, Abigail Williams, 13, and Liberty German, 14, went on a hike at the Delphi Historic Trails. On February 13th, they were reported missing later in the afternoon when they failed to return to a pickup location as a family member returned to pick them up from their hike. After organized searches on February 14th, one of those search parties unfortunately found the bodies of the two teens.
This case can be solved. This is obviously not a local person, the person that killed him, because somebody would know him. Somebody in Delphi would recognize this person. This person could be somebody just passing through Indiana. Could be coming from the East Coast, the West Coast, what have you. You got to think, why? Now, again, I'm not privy to the autopsy, the results, or what other things. So you have to want to understand, why did this person do this? Obviously, the person had a reason for killing these two young girls.
Well, I guess I fear at this point that the most likely thing is, and this is a terrible thing to hope for, is that some other crime would be solved and the person, as has sometimes happened in the past, the person would say, oh, I committed this crime in Delphi also. I started to say, on the one hand, because it's not a very famous kind of place, I always tend to think it was a local person. But the fact that it's not been solved, and the fact there doesn't appear to be any motivation for it, it appears to be a serial killer type of thing. I'm not saying it is, I don't know, but makes me wonder if it wasn't a random act by somebody who isn't around here all the time. But I don't know. I mean, I'd like to tell you I have a strong feeling about that, but I don't. Early on, I would have said, well, it's surely somebody local, because who would know to be out there? Why would you be out there? Why would you even expect to find any other human beings out there in February?
The person responsible for these murders.
A former federal agent provides insight as state police revealed new clues about the person they believe killed two teenagers along a Carroll County trail more than 2 years ago. It was Valentine's Day 2017 when Abby Williams and Libby German were found murdered. No one has ever been arrested.
Today, investigators released the updated sketch, extended audio, and for the first time, video of their prime suspect, an unidentified man captured by Libby's phone. We've seen the pictures before, but today we saw the man in them walk around the former railroad bridge. Police want people to look at the snippet of the video and look for mannerisms they recognize. The new sketch is based on this video, and according to state police, the man could be in the sketch could be anywhere between 18 and 40 years old. Shortly after the girls were murdered, police released audio of the man saying "down the hill." Today, they released what appears to be a longer version of that original clip. Take a listen right here. We've looped it 3 times, and according to police, the man is saying, "Guys, down the hill."
Guys. Down the hill. Guys. Down the hill. Guys. Down the hill.
All right, during today's news conference, Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter addressed the killer directly.
We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have.
Carter went on to say they have likely interviewed the person or someone close to him. Police believe the man either lives in Delphi or visits that area regularly. Police are also looking for a car and the owner of the car that was parked at an abandoned welfare building the day of the murder. Police did not provide a description of that vehicle. Joining us now is News 8's Eric Feldman. This is very complicated, another new layer to this long-time investigation. You talked with a retired FBI agent about what the press conference was about today, really.
Yeah, and he's not involved with the case, but he was with the Bureau for a very long time, and I asked him what he thinks some of the important takeaways were from today.
It's quick, but listen again. Look now, a man walking. It's the newest information Indiana State Police are releasing to find the killer of 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German. If you ask retired FBI agent Doug Coons, this information could help crack open the case.
You can often recognize somebody just kind of by how they hold themselves, by how they swing their arms when they walk. My kids, who look very much alike, kind of by how they move. I wouldn't have to see their faces to know which one's which.
There's now a sketch of the killer, but it looks completely different from the one first released. ISP didn't take questions, so we asked Coons why. Coons says it could be the lighting or the angle.
After you hear what we're going to release today.
We showed Coons the press conference from earlier Monday. He says State Police Superintendent Doug Carter's words are key when talking about their confidence in this new sketch.
The sketch, which you will see shortly, is the person responsible for the murders.
There's no ambiguity.
What I make out of it is that we have a person that committed this crime that's very familiar with the area. The historic trail is kind of isolated, and because it's isolated, I believe that whoever perpetrated these crimes knew that trail, knew it well. It's a long way from the trailhead to where the victims were essentially kidnapped, and what that makes me believe that probably that the perpetrator didn't start at the trailhead. He probably started closer to where he kidnapped. So he probably arrived there from a different area. I kind of got the feeling that he has to be an outdoorsman, probably a fisherman. He is probably a loner. And based on the fact that the girls were suspicious of him and were able to take this surreptitious video, I think that he displayed some strange actions, and the girls were able to pick up on that.
Frank, when you look at, you mentioned to me the other day him seeming to probably be odd in some way or fashion, and that's what alerted Libby. Libby, obviously, her instinct, if you will, went off. Her instincts went off, and Libby videoed him. So getting back to them running into him early on in the walk and getting a feeling that he was an odd kind of guy and maybe even to the point of being dangerous. I mean, because it looks like she didn't just outright video him. She videoed him in like a secret kind of fashion without him seeing. And, what do you think about what is odd about him? As you see him walking across that bridge, what grabs you to lead you to believe that he's odd?
Well, I think Libby intuited a danger. I think this guy was kind of a grubby guy, even though, you're out hiking and that kind of thing. He probably is a predator. And because he's a predator, she probably realized that he was paying too much attention to him. There was just something off base with regard to this individual.
Law enforcement to look at, certainly any people that are released from jail that have criminal records, with assaults and even rapes, you can even prior murders, you could be released after 10, 15 years. But my suggestion would be maybe look more toward any psychiatric cases that have come out of a hospital in the last, several months before that, because
So we have somebody that may be mentally ill, may not be mentally ill, somebody who may be a sexual predator, may not be a sexual predator. So what we're focusing on is the organizational skills. And I am not sure what we see here and how it fits. And I'd like to talk to Frank about that. Frank, do you see organized or unorganized here with this perpetrator?
I see actually both of them occurring. This guy is obviously organized in that he's there with a weapon, We don't know what the weapon is for sure, but he's there with a weapon. He's able to contain these girls. He orders them down the hill. You know, the more I think about this, I think that the girls might have tried to escape down at the bottom of the hill, and that might be the reason that he murdered them in the manner that he did. And so I think at that point he'd lost his organization, and let me kind of explain that a little bit. Libby, who had the camera, if our suspect was aware of the camera, which he could have been, he totally forgets about it when he kills the girl, and he leaves that camera in her possession. And he must have, or phone, which we all know is a camera in these days. And I suspect that he kind of lost it at that point. So that shows the disorganization that I'm talking about.
But when he looks back on his 30-year career, and especially his time here in Indianapolis, he says one of the cases he feels regretful about are the unsolved murders of Abby Williams and Libby German.
We've all had a personal connection to that, and though it's not the FBI's case, Carroll County and Delphi Police Department and Indiana State Police are the lead, but they asked the FBI for our help. And I most certainly was very pleased to provide whatever help we could. And we provided a huge amount of help, but the fact that we've not been able to solve that case has been a disappointment. And I've already challenged my successor, Grant, that I want him to solve it on his watch, because I am confident, very confident that it will be solved. We have viable leads. We've just not been able to solve it yet. But it's so frustrating with the amount of leads and information that we have that we haven't turned that corner yet. So I'm hopeful that that will happen.
He says one of the biggest frustrations he has with this case is some of the misinformation that has been put out about it. He says they've tried to be very responsible with releasing information about the case because of how it might impact Abby and Libby's family.
First, I want to talk about profiling. People say, well, this case should be profiled, blah, blah, blah. And you know when the best profiling happens? In the first 48, not on cold cases. Cold cases means that usually you can profile the case, you might even solve it, but guess what? The evidence is long gone and you can't prosecute. Most cold cases get solved by DNA. And, something hits in the CODIS bank, the guy, maybe he left DNA, but he's not a criminal at that point. He may have committed 5 crimes, but never been caught for anything. He may not have a criminal record. He may have, such stuff that never made it to the CODIS bank. But finally, he gets 20 years later, he does something bad, and they take his DNA and they put it in CODIS, and oh my God, they get a hit, and it turns out he's a serial killer who's killed 14 people. And they find that out when he's, now when he's ready for retirement or ready for a retirement home, and he gets one in prison. But meanwhile, they actually didn't catch him through great investigation or great profiling. They caught him because they had a match on DNA. So the best profiling is done in the first 48, just because that's when you have a chance to talk to the right witnesses. They remember things. You can get the evidence before it vanishes. And this is where I think the serial homicide investigations go south. I do not think serial homicide investigations are handled properly a good portion of the time because there's a wrong attitude towards serial homicide, and I'll tell you what it is. Okay, I want to put this police. This is coming from, I forgot who was in charge of this now. But here we have a press conference. Okay, and in this press conference, this is what was said, and I totally disagree with everything that was said in this press conference. The beginning of it, for some reason, has no sound, but it'll just be patient for like a few seconds, and then you'll hear the sound come up. You'll hear what this guy has to say, and I'll tell you what I think is wrong with the whole thing.
We believe you were hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls? 2 children. Only a coward would do such a thing.
Okay. Here is what I think is wrong with that whole picture. Okay. First of all, I believe we're dealing with a serial killer. You know, I don't have any other, I heard some really weird stories about it, or revenge killing, and somebody's after Libby's father and they killed her and all kinds of nonsense. I see no evidence of this. I see serial homicide here, a serial killer. Now, serial killers are psychopaths. And what you're saying to them, you have to be aware of the fact that they're taking it in as a psychopath, not as a normal person. So the first thing is you want a press conference that is not emotional, because once he sees that everybody's emotional, he's getting a kick out of it. It's like, yeah, look at you. You know, you're all freaking out. Ha, ha, ha. You think you can get me? No, you can't. Oh, you're going to talk about, I want to know what you know. Ooh, and when you catch me, you're going to find out. Really? That just amuses him. It's not scaring him. They think somehow police think that serial killers can be scared into doing stupid stuff. No, that's not it. They're not going to start running around doing stupid stuff. It's nonsense. The second thing is he talks about how are your relatives going to feel when they find out what you did. You think he cares about his relatives? You think he cares about other human beings? He brutally killed 2 teenage girls. I don't think he gives a crap about his relatives or his children or his wife or anybody else. He does not care. So yeah, this is correct. Carter was trying to play mind games with a perp. Yes, and it does not work. Never has worked, doesn't work. Stop playing mind games with a psychopath, especially it just makes no sense. What you really want to do, and this is what I believe is the failure. You want to get somebody out there in a press conference who talks in a very dead tone, just very matter of fact, very, very much we don't talk about what we've got under control. We don't talk about anything. We simply come out and say the such and such police department, sheriff's department, we're going to give you where we are in this case. We're just going to give you very basic information. We are handling the case. We have a great investigative team working on this, and we're working many hours a day, period. And then you say with a blank face, okay, here's what the public needs to know. We already know what we need to know. We have evidence. Tell them you've got evidence. That will freak them out. We have evidence. We're not going to share all of that evidence with the public, but we are going to share other information with the public that we believe could help this case. We're zeroing in on certain persons of interest, but information from the public will also help us know which persons of interest we have already spoken with or are going to speak to that are the killer of these 2 girls. Then you put a chart up, very simple chart. What you do, because when the problem is they keep saying stuff off the top of their heads, and every time you have a press conference, it's a different information, and people go, I don't even remember what I'm supposed to remember. Put the chart up. On the chart, it says exactly the date and time the girls were killed. Okay, so in this particular case, it was, let me look back, February 14th. You put February 14th, 2017, and exactly what time or time frame. I believe it was somewhere around 2 o'clock. Time frame. Put it up there. And you say, this occurred on a Monday. Who do you know was not working on a Monday or would have time on a Monday afternoon to be in this area? Tell people this, because people aren't thinking. What happens if Cousin Joey got fired on Friday and he's not going in to work on Monday? Maybe it's him, or maybe it's a guy who works at night. So tell people, we need to know who it is that wasn't working, or if they were working, had the ability to move around at that particular time of day and have so much time to walk into the location, follow the girls, kill the girls, and walk out of the location. That's the first thing you want to tell people, so people can look at that. Secondly, you want to describe the person in general. Show the picture, say, and we do have the original picture of original sketch of the guy, which we still don't know has anything to do with them. And then you say something basic, and but if you know somebody who doesn't fit this description, but you believe might have to do with this crime, yes, do call us anyway, because sometimes witness descriptions or whatever aren't exact. But do tell people this is a psychopath. We believe he's a serial killer. He's a psychopath. And here's what a psychopath is like. He's a manipulative, lying son of a bitch. So, but you can say that nice. He's a manipulative, lying person. A person that, and you describe them so that people say, gosh, that's my cousin. My cousin does those things. Now, the one thing I believe they also should have told people was what weapon was used. Now, people ask, how much of the crime scene do you describe to the public? None of the crime scene is necessary for the public to know about unless it can absolutely help them identify the killer. Now, the reason I believe that the weapon is useful, and I've heard this before, and it just makes me crack up, that police say, well, we didn't want to say what weapon it was because then the killer would know we know. Doesn't the killer know you know anyway? I mean, you did do the crime scene analysis and the autopsy, did you not? The killer knows that police know what weapon it is. But if you don't say what the weapon is, then people out in the community, for example, let's say you saw some guy throw a knife away, but you don't know that a knife was used in this crime, so you don't call the police. Maybe if the gun was a 38, well, maybe you know somebody with a 38 who was mucking around with it. Maybe they buried it in the backyard. Maybe they asked you to keep the gun for them, which actually has happened in another serial killer did ask one of his buddies to keep a gun for him once. And he never called him because he didn't think it was a big deal because he didn't know it was connected to the crime. So that's the kind of information you want to give up. Also, I mentioned this quite often. There was a crime out in Maryland where the police chief rightly also gave up information about the guy's foot size because there was a footprint, very large feet. He gave a picture of the shoe, which would, from the sole of the shoe, they were able to figure out what the shoe was. Gave a picture of the shoe to the public and so exact size. And don't you know, he did try to get rid of the shoes, but his neighbors saw him running out in his backyard and trying to get rid of them. And he was caught on his first serial homicide. So saved probably about 10 women's lives, by giving the information up. The one other case, which is very significant, is, usually when you want to keep weird stuff to yourself about the crime, because that way when the guy says, oh, and I did this, and you're like, huh, nobody did know that but you and me, that's good. But sometimes when you have a cold case and you're not getting anywhere, there was a case out in California where a guy did what they call, he did this weird cutting. He just chopped up clothing, not to cut the clothes off the women's bodies, but just for the fun of it. And that's what they might call a, quote, signature. Rare, by the way, in most homicides. People call things signatures, which are not really signatures. They're not something so amazing. But signatures is something a guy does for fun, not for the purpose of exactly committing the crime, but for fun as well. So this guy cut up these clothes in weird ways, and the detective on the case said finally, he just fought everybody in his department. He said, I want to put this information out. We're just dead in the water here. Put the information out, and he got a call from another police department that said, we arrested a guy, teenager, years ago, 20 years ago. And the guy, he was cutting up women's clothes really weird. And the detective said, what was his name? And he gave him the name, and they just interviewed the guy. So 20 years later, still chopping up stuff weird. So if it's going to help your case, give the information up. It's not necessary to give up information like stab wounds. I mean, does the public need to know there were 8 stab wounds and not 18 stab wounds? No. Does the person need to know if somebody's throat was cut? No. That is not going to help you identify anybody. So if there's weird things done, though, let's say he took an item off from let's say he took a piece of jewelry from somebody. This was another crime. I remember it was a crime where the girl had like a Disney watch, and they didn't mention that to anybody. But he could have given it to his girlfriend or his his daughter, and said, "Here, I got this neat watch." That would be something worthwhile telling the public. Somebody says, "Well, that's kind of creepy that I got the dude's my boyfriend gave me this necklace. Oh my God, So give up anything you can to catch the guy, because here's the problem with serial homicide. you have no freaking clue who it is. I mean, it's not like, okay, it's probably a boyfriend, it's a drug deal gone bad, it's a opposing gang. You got ideas. Serial homicide, you have nobody. You have an entire community and people passing through the community. You do not know who it is. So you need the public's help to identify the guy, unless you get really lucky with DNA. It just happens to do that, or the guy just gets caught driving out of town and you happen to stop him for a traffic stop and he's got a body in the car. You don't know who it is. And even with this information behind, they still don't know who it is, or theoretically, they don't know who it is. So get information out to the public. Put it on a board. Make it easy. Exact time it happened. Who you should be looking for to give us information. And what you need to know that's specific about this crime that would help you identify him. Do that. Do it in a monotone. Don't play games with the killer. It's pointless. Let him think everybody is looking for him. And you have a big team. That's all you need. All you need to say. Yeah, well, this is always nice. They're waiting for him to kill again. Well, Ladybug, sometimes, that's exactly what happens. They're hoping that he'll kill again and screw up, which is really nice for people who don't want to be. Was that the Golden State Killer, Mickey Mouse Watch? I don't remember. I think it actually, there might have been one there. Maybe it's popular, but I think it was in a Virginia homicide of 2 little girls, if I correctly remember, but I may not. Well, this is a point. Well, I believe he still has a weapon used. I bet it's in his home or workshop. I think it was a knife used, if I'm not mistaken. Well, we have no idea because we do not have evidence that it was a knife, but I bet the weirdo has it. Well, 2 points on that. Sometimes they get rid of things, but sometimes they just like their weapons a lot. It's like, oh, it's a really cool knife. I love my gun. You're like, dude, dump the shit. But a lot of times they do keep it for reasons. And also because they're so arrogant. They think that, so arrogant that they think they're going to get away with it forever and nobody's ever going to catch them. So, and majority of time it is not. And it isn't even usually somebody who's all that, great authority or anything. He's not like running the town. Has it happened that somebody in power or an authority or a police officer has been a serial killer? Yes. Extraordinarily rare. Okay, so I want to point out just the basic persons of interest, and then I'm going to tell you what my analysis of the case is. So let's look at the persons of interest. See if I can. Okay, so first of all, what happens in the beginning? Okay. First of all, this is the first picture they came up with, which sort of looks like it could be the dude. They said he was around 40. Okay, and then for some reason, a couple of years later, they said, no, this is the guy. This guy. I'm like, wow, those look like 2 entirely different people and like 20 years apart in age. They never explain the difference between these 2 supposed people. Now, I also want to point out that we don't know if anybody actually saw this guy. There's very, very sketchy information about, quote, witnesses. Did any witnesses really see this guy? Did they even see him? And if they did see a person, was it him? Or was it some other person who now does not want to talk to the police because they don't want to be labeled the bridge guy if they were anywhere close to this area? Or did they see the bridge guy but give a bad description? I don't know. And they've never explained exactly these. It's very sketchy. So anyway, let's look at who they are. Now, I want to point out the first 2 people that a lot of people said, what about this guy and this guy? Okay, where is this guy? Okay, here he is. I'm in front of him. There he is. Okay, now this guy. Now let me look. A lot of people online call him the flannel shirt guy because supposedly Derek German, that would be Libby's father, asked him if he saw anybody, and this guy was walking around out there, and he was told that, by the way, this guy is the organizer for the Monin, or whatever, how you pronounce it, High Bridge Trail. He works on all the trails and he walks around the trails all the time. He was walking on the trail that day. He told Derek didn't see the girls, but he said there was a couple at the bridge or under the bridge or near the bridge. That's also confusing. So he is very involved with the whole trail thing. And also he's got a brother named Dan who's into history stuff in Delphi. So these 2 guys are really into the history and history and nature of Delphi. Now, could he look somewhat like this guy? Yeah, he could. And he was on the trails that day. And one of the most interesting things about being on is, when police interview people, sometimes they interview the guy. He's like the first guy they interview. He's the guy that actually was around the area. Now, this guy was around the area. He was on the trails. He knows the trails. Could it have been him? Well, one of the problems is that he's not very young. He's in his 70s. And he's got no criminal history, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. But it would be somewhat odd that a guy, and first of all, the guy doesn't look like he's in his 70s. The guy walking does not look quite that old. But he might be in good shape because he walks around a lot. But that he would kill on his own, right there on his own turf in the middle of the day, I think it's a long stretch. And I do not believe the police have him as a person of interest. It's just that, that's the area he works. So, or is interested in volunteers and does a lot of stuff for the community. But, certainly people are going to, the final shirt guy, and did he actually have, because the guy, this guy, walking bridge guy, looked like he might have be bulky. Did he like rip off his, did he have a flannel shirt underneath and rip off his jacket and toss it? And then, so that's where people start looking at who could it be? Now there's another guy who immediately got nailed, and don't tell me his picture is gone missing. I'm going to be angry at that. Seriously? Hold on a second. I'm looking for it because every time I do one of these shows here he is. Something goes missing, and I'm like, did I actually just not get it up there? Okay, this guy. Now the girls were found on this guy's property, Ron Logan. He had a lot. His property is quite extensive. So when the bridge guy forced the girls across the stream and killed them there, it was on his property. Poor sucker. Anyway. That he is on probation at the time, and we broke probation, by the way, which is he got himself in trouble by leaving his property and going out and about when he shouldn't have been going out and about because he was on probation. He was on probation for alcohol and habitual traffic violations. So people go, oh, it's first of all, it's his property, ooh, and secondly, he's got a little bit of a criminal history there, right, or at least some kind of misdemeanor stuff. But guess what? Lucky dude, he has a solid alibi. He was actually buying some fish at Aquarium World in Lafayette at the time the girls were killed. Lucky son of a bitch, because can you imagine if he didn't have a rock solid alibi? I mean, they did search his place anyway, but and he's 77. It's pretty unlikely that the bridge guy is a 77-year-old dude who suddenly decides to kill a bunch of teenage girls. So probably not. So now, but we have these two guys who are reasonable suspects as far as the first one walks the trails all the time. He's around that area. He was on the trails that day. The other guy, his property. Reasonable suspects. Now, let me tell you about the other ones and how things go somewhat amiss when you're talking about who they are. And I'm going to try to get these correct because I'm trying to remember whose face is what. Okay, so this dude, I think was one of the first ones. I think his name is Daniel Nations. He apparently is a sex offender from Indiana, but he was arrested in Colorado for running around with a hatchet, trying to attack people with a hatchet. Creepy dude. People thought, oh my God, that's definitely him. But, just because he committed a crime in Colorado running around with a hatchet doesn't mean he killed the girls. However, I don't know what the police have done, how much they've looked at him, and what kind of, if there's anything there that makes any sense. Okay, then we got this guy. Wait a minute, let me find him. I think it's this guy. See, it gets so confusing. Okay, I think it's this guy. If I'm wrong, sorry. Is that the pastor dude? Wait a minute. It's like there's so many different pictures. I think that's supposed to be the pastor guy. This is a guy, supposedly an ex-pastor. He wore a navy blue jacket and a flat cap, which kind of looked like the bridge dude. And he sexually assaulted and shot some women in a religious store in St. Louis. Okay, that's a creepy crime. That he's the guy that, again, the problem people have is that there's creepy people everywhere. That's the problem. And, when you're looking at, we got more criminals out there than people realize, and more psychopaths who do wild and crazy crimes. And I don't know what he particularly, that if he's not proven to be in Indiana at that point, in Delphi, Indiana at that point, it's a stretch. But see, people call these in because, it kind of looks like it could be the guy. Okay. And then there's this guy. I think I got the name right on this one. I think this is Charles Eldridge. He's from Union City, which is 2.5 hours away. He's supposedly a child molester. He looks kind of pudgy to me, but could have been him, But it's 2.5 hours away. Now I live between Bowie. I live in Bowie, Maryland, but I live between Baltimore, Maryland, and DC, Washington D.C. 2.5 hours away from me is past Philadelphia. Doesn't he have people to attack in Philadelphia? Why would he be coming all the way down to Delphi? Makes no sense unless he's a trucker and he's rolling through the area. Okay, and here's the most recent guy. This came up just recently in May. This is James Chadwell. Oh yeah, he's supposed to match the new picture. This one. Well, maybe it matches the old picture. Maybe he's in between both of them, so it's perfect, right? Kind of looks like both of them. Okay, but he's a lot younger. Oh, he's not that much younger. Anyway, he lives 20 miles away, a little closer. But again, that's like, they have to look at his movements. 20 miles away from me is Baltimore, and I never go to Baltimore. And so why wouldn't you just run around Baltimore? Why would you come all the way 20 miles away to my town? He lives 20 miles away. He lured a 9-year-old girl into the house and sexually assaulted her. So he's a creepy dude. Yes.